The aforementioned school choice, and our speaker is going to be talking about that and what we need to do to pass it. By way of introduction, I think most of us understand what is happening in the government-run schools now. You may not be able to read the writing here, but you say, the parents are very concerned. It says, our son thinks we live in a great country. And the teacher or the principal is saying, well, Mrs. Winchime, I can assure you, he didn't learn anything like that in this school. Here's your typical unionized teacher. Here's some of the XXX sex education that they're giving, and this isn't even the really explicit stuff that you'll find in the government-run schools. And the net result of this, the percentage of 12th graders in the far right column that meet educational standards: civics 24%, geography 20%, math 25%, reading 37%, science 22%. And these are probably all just dumbed down standards. U.S. history 12%, and the 12% that know anything, it's all anti-American history. Since 1950. Students are up 96% in the government-run schools, teachers are up 252%, and non-teaching staff are up 702%. Since 1970, real per-student spending in the government-run schools has more than doubled, while the number of students has increased about 7%. And the lines at the bottom show what's happened with academic performance in the government-run schools over the same time. And here are some of the fine products of the government-run schools, as well as this fine young woman. Oh, let's go back one. Your typical millennial. You can't read all the writing. I'll just read some of it. 47% of millennials, she believes in socialism. 36% believe in communism. 43% think that the Communist Manifesto better guarantees freedom and equality than the U.S. Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. 64% agree with the phrase, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Like half of U.S. adults, she cannot read above the 8th grade level. That's the product of the government-run schools. The bad guys understand the principle in teaching and indoctrinating the next generation. Vladimir Lenin or Adolf Hitler, again, he understood the same principle of how societies work. Some of the good guys do too. Ronald Reagan, if we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. Oops, go forward. And freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And Donald Trump talking about the societies and schools that teach their children to hate their own country and to view the people who made the country as villains, not as heroes. Tim Donnelly, who ran for Congress in this area, said that to be free, you have to think free. And what we see happening over here in the government-run schools is training the next generation to think not free. Getting America's children out of the government-run schools is a national survival issue. It's not good, not important, it's not for better education. No, those are all things, yes, it will provide better education. Getting America's children out of the government-run schools is a national survival issue, and there is no political cause more important than the one we're fighting now and that Mike is going to introduce. Or you can homeschool. We have that conference coming up on November 13th at the Ark Church. The only way to do it en masse is with school choice. The aforementioned Rick Grinnell, and one way you can also contact him through his Twitter account or social media, and you can all tell him, don't be a school choice saboteur. And with that, we'll bring Mike Alexander up to the stage. I'll say this. Great things great things happen because an individual or individuals have a single-minded focus and dedication to achieving something that many people would have said is not possible. But they make it possible through that dedication. I don't know who said it was, that some things are impossible until they're done. I don't remember who said that, but this is the same principle here, and we are at the stage where we have an initiative drafted and almost ready to go out for signature because of Mike Alexander's leadership and dedication on the issue, and we appreciate it. And with that, I will turn it over to you. You have the better microphone is on the podium there, and you are recognized for so long as you want to talk. Just turn off the lights when you're done.
Very good. Well, you're very generous, Greg. And the fact is that this great school choice movement grew directly out of the Tea Party movement, which goes back, of course, to 2009. And the Tea Party movement in the United States is the only thing that I'll admit that Obama actually built. No question about that. And so we stand here, school choice, he can take credit for it because it started here. And this group began at the same time that our group in Pasadena did. We had a lot of contacts, and over these years, it has accounted for a tremendous amount of conservative American action. And right here in this group, I'd like to recognize, first of all, the team that's here and who comes from. If you want to know who the leadership is, let's just start with the ladies. Janice Hauser, right? The better half of Janice and Doug. And the other ladies, we have Miss Rose is over here. We have Ashley Gilliam is here. These are all out of here. We have, of course, Dr. Dale Broom, been a senior leader and major contributor to what we're doing. Greg Britton has been part of our drafting force. We've had a lot of people on the drafting team, and there are tons of people in here who have actually been out helping us to collect signatures. So this is there's one, the big dog right here has been out there walking, just doing exactly what Mark Moiser talked about, and he couldn't be more right. All we have to do to lose is to do nothing. And I want to join my remarks to Mark's here as regards getting out the vote. When we can learn many things from the recent elder, I'm going to call it a victory of activism. And let me start. A lot of us here listen to the same people. And I want to say one thing here, that and that is that nobody in this country predicted what happened here a month ago and over the last year. Nobody, not Mark Levin, Dan Bongino, Sean Hannity, not even our dearly beloved Rush Limbaugh. None of them predicted what happened here in California. And that is that people would get organized. And this did not come out of the institutional Republican Party. It came right out of the parking lots, the houses, the businesses, the grassroots of this state of California. It came from you. It came from us. In fact, if we have one thing in common, it is that we are almost universally reviled by the institutional Republican Party, who pay us no mind. You should have gone through what I had to go through here over the last several months. And we're going to get our freedom back, not because anybody in a political party gives it to us, but because we take it back. And these people here have never faltered. Not for a moment did they stop believing in liberty. Not for a moment did they stop believing in this state. There were, however, 3 million registered Republicans with no excuse who stayed home, who could have elected Larry Elder. That's right. Like Larry, don't I happen to like Larry. He and I shared broadcasting booth at KRLA. But whatever it is, he was the man up there. There were several other people. So whoever it was that they might have voted for, we'll never know, because they stayed home because they believed in the BS. Let me also state that all of this, even though it's not on school choice, it is, because the question here is not whether you're sold on school choice, it's how do we get that back? And here in this state, I'll tell you what the secret to Democrat victory is. They work. And when you look at the California Teachers Association, 350,000 of them. Each of them pay $1,000 a year in dues. And even if you went to one of their schools and you have trouble with math, pull out your Obama phone and add it up. That's $350 million per year, $700 million each election cycle, $1.4 billion every 4 years. Now here in the state of California, in fact, Mark and I were working on kind of the same project independently. This has been part of my stump speech for years here. Here in the state of California, we have about 5 million people that think the same way we do. It's probably more if we bother to get out and really dig them up and get them over where they need to be on registration. But in this state, if each Republican, each of the 5 million people roughly that agree with us, contributed $100 per year, not even the $1,000 a year that the teachers union contributes, $100 per year. That'd be $500 million per year in the state of California. That would be $1 billion every 2 years. Now I ask you, would this state look like it does if we were collecting and spending wisely $1 billion every 2 years in the state? Hell no, it wouldn't. Right, but the fact is, when people like me, Moiser here, go out, we're lucky to get a $10 bill tucked in our G-string when we're trying to take this state back. Ladies and gentlemen, that ain't cutting it. That ain't cutting it. So you're gonna have to dig. Don't think this is going away. And the same people who come down here and eat dinner and suck suds and bitch and complain when we lose are the same people that you're going to have your money taxed away, your Social Security given away, your Medicare compromised as you sit and as you die. And when you get down to the end of it, all of us here, what's the average age here? Over 70? You are a burden on the system. Don't forget what Mr. Obama told you 10, 15 years ago. Now this is a mature audience. You guys can understand it. But what's happening here, all is rooted in one thing, and that is this vast criminal enterprise called the public school system. And this system, we know, whatever else it does, its primary duty is to indoctrinate, and its primary objective is to ensure that Americans will obey. Period. Our problems in this country did not begin recently or with the Democrat Party or with the California Teachers Association. It actually began 100 years ago when we first turned our children over to the government for education. We established universal mandatory education. We put it in the hands of the bureaucrats. This was the great progressive experiment of the 20th century. It's long forgotten. And it was joined then, as it is now, by big business. Henry Ford and other great leaders of industry, people whom we admire at so many levels, had joined with the progressives, and their view was that somehow Americans needed to be trained and educated to become part of the great industrial vision of the future. And those progressives and those industrialists had a vision of us that was eerily familiar and hardly distinguishable from the plan that the communists and the socialists and the collectivists had. It's the same plan, it's the same people, right? So if we're going to turn this thing around, the first thing we have to do is to take our kids back. And let's do that. And when we see teachers and government bureaucrats and these other low IQ health department directors and so forth chasing our children around with a needle, we wonder to ourselves, why in the world would they think that they could do that? Why in the world would they think that they could tell us to stay home or wear a mask or shut our businesses down or shelter or any such other nonsense? Well, the answer is simple. When you gave them your children 100 years ago, they knew that if you would put up with that, you would put up with anything. And they weren't wrong, were they? And so they put their pedal to the metal here within the last several years, but the great collectivist enterprise has been underway for a long time. We lost our property, we lost our children, we, as a practical matter, lost claim to our liberties. It is so bad out there that we got to send a battalion of lawyers into the system to argue with our masters about our own rights. We're arguing now with with these bureaucrats, these contemptible people over our own children, and they claim the right to take the kid from you if necessary. How about that idiot McAuliffe and the other moron that was up there the other day in Congress? And we're just beset by them. The parents have no role in the education or the moral or the intellectual or political formation of their own children. This is intolerable. This is a crime that cries out to heaven for revenge. And that revenge is here, I'm happy to say. All right? And I'm cheerful about it, because right now I have it on excellent information that the enemy just recently wrapped up a meeting back on the East Coast, South Carolina, probably Hilton Head, on the public money, and called it the study. And they were back there for one reason. They had gathered the heads of all the crime families around the country to gather there to figure out what they were going to do to cope with you and school choice. That was the subject. It's no accident that within a week, that contemptible weakling, what's his name, Merrick Garland. Is that just an insufferable name? Merrick? Oh, Merrick, right. Can you imagine going to school with him? My God, I'll bet you he got funked every day, right, with a name like that. Take this, Merrick. Yeah, this guy puts his mouth on all of us. So if you've got a parent or anybody else that raises hell with the school board like we're entitled to do, you know, as if it were our children, our money, and we had any choice at all, or our vote, this guy dares to call us a domestic terrorist, right? And he's going to set up a hotline. Well, I hope he sets up that hotline, because I think we're going to get people on it, right? So what's this, Go Brandon? What's the name of that?
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon. So let's go, Mary, right? I think that hotline, that every patriot in the country ought to call that damn hotline and say, yo, Merrick, we just want to pass along our compliments, right? And just tell them. Yeah, isn't that what they do? Flood the zone, you know, shut down the system, a little Cloward-Pippin theory for them. All right, let's get to the fundamentals. I think most of you know here what our school choice initiative is. Very simple. We don't call it the Education Savings Account Act, which is the other COLA. Ours, we changed the name early on to the Educational Freedom Act. And that's truly an important and crucial difference in our bill and the others, because it focuses on what is at issue, which is the natural freedoms of the parents and natural rights. And you will see those themes incorporated in our preamble. You won't find it in the other version. This is extremely important. And it says 4 simple things. And this is why it will win. Translate in any language you want. Educational Freedom Act. Number 1, here's your due diligence, Mark. Number 1, on the demand request of any parent, an education savings account will be established. Number 2, annually that child will receive his share of what are known as Prop 98 funds. It starts at $14,000 per year per child and will be adjusted annually with the fluctuation in Prop 98. Number 3, the parents, not the unions or the zip code, can choose to direct those trust funds to an accredited private or religious school, their choice. And number 4, keep any money left over for college, vocational training, or other qualified educational expense. In fact, those 4 key features are held in common by both of the bills that are out there. So a good friend of mine says they didn't just, our bill was so good that they didn't steal it once, they stole it twice. Because after we put in all of the rest of our amendments, those 2 were imitated, but still not as good as the original. Now, these 4 things are so simple that when you explain them to Democrats, they appreciate them. I would like to relay an anecdote here, and I'm serious. The people going to pass this could be Republicans, but it won't be. It's going to be Democrats, small d Democrats. All the people that you and I know who work in the grocery stores, who work in the checkout lines, who teach, who work in factories and share the neighborhoods and parishes with us and go to church with us. These are people with children, and they very often are condemned to the worst schools. We can't tell them anything. We don't have to tell them anything. They're experts on this system. They know they don't get any respect. But just to show you this, I was doing grief counseling for a Republican group here the other night. And this guy was whining and crying about the election being stolen and all that sort of thing. And I said, oh man, and I'm gonna have to do this for another couple of hours. So I tried to reprogram and redirect him. I said, look here, we can have great success with school choice. And I said, this is another one of these high-dollar speeches. This time I was in the line at Sizzlers, okay? So I couldn't even order it. I had to go stand in the line to get my Sizzlers. So as I told this guy, I said, here, watch this. And there was a couple in front of us. It was clearly Latino, looked to be about in their early 40s. And I said, excuse me, ma'am, if you got just a minute, my friend and I here have been talking about a project, and I'd like to get your impressions. And I began to talk about school choice. I explained the 4 points very briefly. He says, oh yeah, we could overhear you guys talking about that. Told her all about it. I said, would this program have any interest for you and your family? Oh yes. Now he spoke English perfectly, right? They also spoke Spanish because I overheard a little bit of it. They said, oh yes, that'd be perfect. We'd love it because, schools aren't so good and my boy isn't doing so well over here. I'd like to go over there. Typical conversation that my team, our team, has had thousands of times here in the state of California. And after that was done, then I said, una cosa más, right? Just one more thing here. I said, your answer doesn't make any difference. Do you and your husband generally vote Republican or do you generally vote Democrat? I don't care what the answer is. Oh, we generally vote Democrat. There you go. All right, so don't show me your polls and all this idiotic poll testing and focus groups that consultants put together for fun and a lot of profit. Don't tell me about those. We have been test marketing this concept for years now, and these are typical of the conversations. Now, I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you, when you go into your doctor's office and there's one of the nurses there, you know, the gal that's fetching your medical records, maybe she's drawing your blood, taking your temperature, walking you to the examination room, chat her up. Just ask her. How about your FedEx guy? He's usually, a lot of them are really young guys. Ask him if he's got any kids. You run this program by 4 easy questions. It's right on the back. One of my business cards, so we got flyers here. You ask Dr. Dale and the team for it. Right on the back there. You ask them that, and they will tell you, yes, we like it. Now there's the secret. So we here in California, arguably, I said arguably, I don't want to get into this debate. There isn't much of an organized Republican Party right now. But I want you to pay close attention to this. There really isn't a Democrat Party in this state either. Now, I know that there's plenty of people with the D behind their name, but the Democrat Party in this state currently is a wholly owned and operated subsidiary of the public employee unions. It is not a party, it is not a party in any regular sense of the word, because if it functioned like a real party that actually had control, it would do things for its constituents, and it doesn't. It does things to its constituents. It does very little, if anything, for them. And when we, as conservatives and as grassroots organization, come to them in a nonpartisan way, they are ready to look at this, because we are not in an R versus D argument on this case. That's a discussion if you happen to be out there with your Republican hat on. That's a wonderful discussion, but now you have a reason to go into any neighborhood in San Bernardino or Los Angeles County and talk to those people about the most important thing in their lives, and that is their children's future, their grandchildren's future, and the future that we all share here today. Now, here in the state of California, as we know, education is 48th in the nation. Whatever it is, and Greg did a great job of showing just how terrible it is, and that's by the fairly low standards of public education. You know, they're not exactly MIT entrance examinations that they're coming in at 25%. You know, yeah, they max out at 8th grade. And as a result, we have started to develop a large, immovable, lower class here in the state of California, in a country which does not have a class system, is not based on one. We're actually building one. In fact, we're busy importing to flesh out that class. We here in the United States, our success has always depended upon social, economic, and political mobility. And the substrate of that, the foundation of that mobility, of that which defines America, is literacy, education, and opportunity. And here in California, we have obliterated that, and we have an increasing number of people who are stuck at the bottom and can't move. And so when you look back over, for example, the huge arguments and public policy debates that we had in the mid-century, mid-20th century, and the latter part of the 20th century, we established one thing for sure. We all understood that poverty, ignorance, and crime all went together. And right now we have a plan for manufacturing it at an industrial rate. And that's what we're seeing. And as if things weren't bad enough, we're actually importing poverty, importing ignorance, and importing crime into our society to bulk up that social class at the bottom that's not moving. And we here in this room share that future. If we don't see to it that every child in this state has an opportunity to learn equal access to quality education, we fail. And the only people who are going to give them that education are the parents. And the only way that they're going to be able to do that is if we give the parents back control over their own money. Right? here in this room are universally, what are we about? 98% white here? You know, anytime you listen to it, everything's racist. Well, the fact is that people like us, white folks, wonder-bred white folks, whiter than white, hell, I'm so white I'm pink. You know, we voted for decades for quality education, poured more and more money in property taxes into that system. And the people who controlled that system would not give that education that we paid for, that we wanted to. So now what we have to do, we here in this room, need to go into the Latino communities. We need to go into the poor communities. We need to go into the black communities and tell them, hey, look, we voted this stuff for decades. They wouldn't give you access to quality education. Now, by golly, we're here to make good on that promise that was made to you. Period. Now, you don't have to vote Republican. Hell, you don't even need to like me. Just vote for yourselves and your future. If you and your children have a shot, then me and my kids, we have a shot, and we know that we can restore this country. There's no doubt of it. In fact, this country isn't even dead, it's disorganized. What we have to do is to get busy, and the way that we start the great, you call it a reformation, a counter-revolution, whatever you want to call it, getting America back to where it needs to be and getting California to the forefront, it's the most important thing, and as Greg and I have discussed so many times, school choice is not just a good thing to do. School choice is not just the most important thing that we can do. School choice is probably the only thing that we ought to be doing, because that lays the foundation for getting us back. And one way to understand that vote for Larry Elder is simple. All it was a lab test to see if the indoctrination was working, right? So if you're doing it, if your indoctrination is running right, you got these kids going through the system just fine, you should get that kind of voter result, shouldn't you? And that's what they did, except for there were hundreds of thousands, millions of people here in this state, including a ton of Democrats, including a ton of blacks, a ton of Latinos. They came out to say, we don't like what's going on in the state. So we do need to get organized. And yes, ballot harvesting, I thoroughly agree, Mark. You know, this game, we didn't make these rules, we didn't want them, but we're gonna have to play by the rules. And as Mark says, get on the floor, get on the court, start shooting, because that's the way it's gonna be. And there's a ton of so-called judges who are gonna back them up to the hill. And the judges are going to tell us, hey, well, look, I didn't write these rules, you guys. If you don't like them, why don't you go out, get yourself selected, and pass some new laws? That's the way our system works. A few last comments. In the United States, there's many ways to describe our government. And one of the ways that we frequently describe our government is as a government, a place where the government derives its legitimacy from the consent of the government. A place where they draw the power from you and from me. And that's still the case, ladies and gentlemen. But what that means in our democracy, in our Republican, democratic form of government here, what it means is that when these things happen, when we get people like Biden, when we get runaway government and bureaucrats, all of that is on you. All of that is on me. You can't just sit there and think that somebody else is going to do it. We are either the citizens and we control this country, or we don't, and I think that we do, so we have to get busy. And please, please, don't ever tell me that the vote doesn't matter, or getting out the vote doesn't matter. Because if the vote didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying to steal it. You got it?
Yeah.
They wouldn't be. Because in our form of government, and you see even throughout the world, the worst of the thieves, the worst of the thugs, except maybe the Idi Amin, ISIS, and some of those people. In the Northern Hemisphere, even in China, they think that they have to have elections in order to keep the mob at bay. So the Russians, the Chinese, the people who elected Hitler, it was important to Hitler that he was able to say that he was democratically elected. It's important to our tyrants, even more so, that they be able to claim that they're elected, so that they can take a 3-vote majority or 5-vote, I don't know how many thieves Pelosi has up there, that gives her what she calls a majority. On that thin basis, they can carry out a revolution in our country. Never underestimate the value of the vote. These are the things, ladies and gentlemen, that are at stake. Now, a week from tomorrow, I should have the first petition. As a result of the incredible amount of work that's been done here and by others across the state to bring this bill to fruition, we will have a petition and we'll be in the streets, and then we're going to have 180 days, actually less by the time you ramp up, get printed, distributed, and you've got to stop a couple of weeks ahead of time. It's more like 155 days. But one way or the other, you got about 5 to 6 months where we have to gather just under 1 million valid signatures. Now, just to be sure, because they won't cheat, we know that. I accept that part. Remember, you don't have the brightest or the sharpest people working at the registrar of voters, right? We know where they graduated from, right? The same schools that are only 25% literate, right? Well, they go right to work for the government, right? So that's the cream of the crop. That's who's counting our votes. At any rate, we're going to have to gather 1.5 million to make sure that we have the other. And Greg is saying too. I got the Q man over here too. We'll keep racing. Our first rollout event is going to be at the end of October. It'll be Trick or Treat Weekend, where instead of letting the teachers union steal candy out of the kids' bags, we're going to have the kids and their parents taking their money back out of the teacher union's goodie bags, right? And on that weekend, I know this is a church-going group here. On that weekend, all I really want to know is, where are you going to be? What church are you going to be in front of on Halloween weekend? Our goal is to be in front of 1,000 churches on that weekend throughout the state of California. And we got 100 or more booked right now, and more coming on now that we know when we're going to have the petition. We need to send a message to the opposition here. We need to send a message even to certain people who are theoretically on our side, that we are exercising the leadership that we're capable of and have been exhibiting here over the last couple of years, and that we're ready to go. That's the most important thing you can do. Each and every one of you should already be signed up in our system. Now you've got a contribution level envelope there. Shove some love in that contribution envelope. But even if you don't have any love for me, put your name on it if you're not already getting an email from me, so that I can at least get you connected, because everybody that's connected will get a ballot and a sign-up sheet in the mail from us. So that's around 20, 30,000, plus we have another mailing list of a lot. That's what will be going on. So this is a group that is already dedicated to liberty. I don't have to crank you up too much. You know what the program is. Now all we have to do is to go out and win this thing. Now, Greg, did you want to do some questions?
Yes, we do.
All right, very good. Do we want to have the panel up here?
Ask our local leaders, Jan and Doug Hauser and Dale Broom, to come up to the stage as well. That way, for every question, you can get not one, not two, but 3 answers to your question.
Yeah, well, we promise to make it shorter than that. We'll pick one of us. All this is a heck of a debating society.
If you have a question, step up.
Yes.
And everyone at once.
Anybody, a question, a comment, a criticism.
How will your initial?
By the way, I forgot to say one thing. Does anybody know what today is? October 7th?
Thursday?
Well, first of all, the Battle of Lepanto took place back in the 1500s, and that was where Western civilization beat the Ottoman fleet and saved Europe. And because of that, the Catholics celebrate today as the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary, right? But what October 7th really is the date that I met my wife 49 years ago. So happy anniversary, baby. All right. I know it's been fun. You don't have to say anything. All right.
I don't see anybody in line here. How does your initiative work with homeschoolers?
Okay. Dale, you've done so much on homeschooling.
Yeah, so what's distinctive about our initiative is that any child in California can have an education savings account, including all homeschoolers. Now, we have two types of homeschoolers in our state. Ones that are working through charter schools and ones that are working with what's called a private school affidavit. And any of those can get funding. But to use the funding for K through 12 education, they're going to link up with a local private school that will administer the account for them, get their curriculum and various things like that. So they'll be able to use that. Now, if you want to be a private school affidavit homeschooler, you can leave that money in that account, let it accrue over the years, and then when your child goes off to college or vocational training, that's when they can access those funds. But that is very distinctive from the other initiative, which cuts out the homeschoolers, the private school affidavit homeschoolers, and then limits how much money can accumulate in the account.
Yeah, the saboteurs' proposed initiative would limit your ESA to $50,000.
So they upped it to 60,000. So that's not enough to go very far.
Any other questions? I don't see any.
Well, let me pose one, and I'll throw this to Doug. Doug, we know that our school educational freedom act initiative here will add current private school students to the body, so we're going to be paying them $14 grand. Would you talk to this group here about how the money's going to work, how to affect funding and spending?
Sure. This is a question that comes up because in the legislative analyst report, they refer to a possible $4 billion deficit, they call it, in the first year when students who are currently in private schools or some homeschoolers access the funds, and they are essentially drawing off from the system when they were not doing so before. However, Dale and I crunched the numbers, and we looked at two things. We looked at money that is left behind when students apply for and get an ESA, because they only get in the ESA the Prop 98 funds, which, as Mike said, is be about $14,000 or upwards per year, while the state of California actually spends a total of about $20,000 per pupil per year from a variety of other sources. So that $6,000 or $7,000 is left behind money to be shared among all the students who remain in the public schools. And my analysis showed that if you take that money into account, and also a very conservative estimate of reduction in overhead, as they have fewer and fewer students, of course it's not going to cost as much to educate them, it turns out that when 6.5% of the public school students are withdrawn, the remaining students will actually have more dollars per student than they would otherwise have had. So even the students who are, quote unquote, left behind in the public schools, which is a really sad metaphor when you think about it, that being in the public schools means you're being left behind, very sad. But even those students will actually have more funding per pupil than they would otherwise have had. And we could easily see within a couple of years, there could be 10 or 15% of the students withdrawn, and the remaining students would have much more funding than they would otherwise have had.
Doug, will this raise taxes or affect tax revenue?
This should not raise tax revenue at all. It's merely taking money out of the Prop 98 budget for public schools and allowing the parents to access their share. Our initiative includes a clause that basically says any student who gets an ESA counts towards attendance in the public schools. So that means the money that goes to their ESA is properly part of the Prop 98 funding as it is even currently considered. So there should be absolutely no tax increase needed. In fact, as more students are pulled out of the public schools and the remaining students have more and more money left to them, I could envision a time where the left behind money would be $30,000 per student, up from $20,000, and the students getting the ESA are getting $15,000 per student. And so we'd say the public schools have twice as much money per pupil to do a worse job, because if they weren't doing a worse job, people wouldn't be pulling their kids out. And maybe it's time for a tax cut. So it just seems like 2 to 1 seems maybe a bit of a high of a ratio.
You have a question?
Maybe more like a comment. I'm a teacher. I survived the public school system for 13 years as a teacher at Etowanda High School.
Quiet, please.
And I'm a charter school teacher now, but I also, sorry? Okay. So I work for a charter school, and I also homeschool. So I'm all over the place. One thing I think that a lot of parents don't know, because a lot of parents have tried to come to charter schools and they can't, because we were capped by AB 1505 and 15, all these ones a couple years ago. So we were capped at wherever we were at that point, and while a lot of parents think they have the choice and they want to come in, there's waiting lists, and there are some good charters out there that are doing things that are not following what all these schools are doing, and parents want to get in there, they can't because we're capped. And so one of the things I tell parents is when it comes to the school choice initiative, the reason we're capped is because the law said that whatever that student's address determines is the school. That's where their money goes no matter what. That was part of that law. So if we get a new student, we don't get the funding for that student. We have to just kind of like do it out of the generosity of our hearts with less resources. But if this were passed and if this makes it to fruition, then they could enroll where there's no cap to that anymore. That money would go from that student at that public school to the charter where they want to go. So even if they didn't want to homeschool, which they should, I mean, I do, and I'm a huge
The
proponent,
charter
but
schools
the charters
will probably convert to accredited private institutions.
Yeah.
Now, this raises another question, and I'll put this to Dr. Dale. What impact does this initiative have on the existing public school system and how it's funded and how it's currently dealing with this administration?
Well, as we drafted this initiative, it was specifically drafted not to interrupt or disrupt the current public school funding for the local school districts or the charter schools, because they are all public schools. We are just basically setting aside that child's ESA, the child that has an ESA, we're just setting aside their money so that they can then use that for a private or parochial school or homeschool education. So we're not directly messing with this local sharing of funds that go between one school district and the other. We're not dealing with that. Now the other thing is, the point is that the charter schools will likely convert to private schools because they'll actually get better per pupil funding than they would if they remained at charter schools under the current system of regulations that are placed upon by the state.
Right, and they will also have more academic freedom and the ability to expand if they feel like it.
Well, in fact, I'm going to ask that question. As far as what impact we'll have in the schools, to paraphrase a good friend of mine, if you like your public school, you'll be able to keep it, right? And if you like your public school teacher, you can have her, all right? No problem. While I've got you up here, well, Dr. Dale, you did so much work in this area. Tell me, please, about one of the great concerns that parents have over curriculum mandates. That is, funding us as a private school, but turning around and regulating us, telling us what we can or cannot teach, thereby transforming us into a private indoctrination center. How did you deal with that, or how did we deal with that in the drafting?
Well, we specifically built walls of protection for private schools and private homeschools so that when they receive state funding through this ESA program, we're stipulating that the state cannot come in and dictate curriculum mandates admission policies, disciplinary policies, teacher credentialing requirements, and all these other things that they might want to try to regulate the private schools with. We built a strong wall, we believe, that will protect those private schools. We've also done some protections for the student, because the student also is a game player in this thing too. We don't want the state to come in and tell any child that has an ESA that they have to be vaccinated. They have to do certain things, okay, to get that money. Your health, those vaccinations should not be linked to your education funding. And that's what we've tried to do, is build a wall of protection for the student.
Now, the more important questions. Debbie's still back there. Is this your last meeting with us, or are you going to come back in November? Last meeting, okay. And we should have done more for that. Debbie Lalo led the efforts in this area for the recall Gavin signatures.
Love it.
Debbie spent
Thank
essentially
you.
every weekend out there gathering signatures, and her volunteers did the same. And as a result, they were able to qualify the recall Gavin Newsom for the ballot. So the really important question is, how many people here are willing to go out 2 hours a week and gather signatures? Yes? Okay, that's not bad. How many people are signed up on the email list for the California School Choice Foundation? Not bad, not everyone. And how many people are on a regular monthly contribution to the California School Choice Foundation? Even if it's $5, $10, whatever it is. Okay, if we're going to do this, if we're going to defeat the enemy that has $1 billion to spend on it, every hand needs to be up on all three questions. You want to save the country, every hand needs to be up. We can't make you do anything. It's your country to save or not, your children to save or not, your grandchildren to save or not.
Let me say, before you leave this room, everybody whose hand didn't go up for, to be signed up for the website, come over to the table here and sign up for the website. And take some, we have some here. And we also have literature for you to take, for you to look at and show your neighbors to get them to sign up for the website. No reason why not. It's free of charge to sign up. It's free of charge to volunteer. Free of charge to set up a table and start collecting signatures. And I assure you, you may think, I'm going to go to this place, I'm going to get 10 signatures. You'll end up getting 100. Because when you just describe this idea to people, as Mike said, they like it. Virtually every single person likes this idea. And you won't have arguments, you won't have fights, you'll have signatures. So come on by and sign up.
I want to thank you all. There's so much more that we could talk about. We'll be available afterward. You've been very patient this evening. The evening wears on. Greg, thank you for your gracious invitation. Thanks for all your support here. Thank you, everybody. And we look forward to helping, working with you to gather signatures, and that's in like 7 to 10 days. God bless everybody. We'll see you next time.